I am really excited for this next part of our night. So we've got our own Christy Boulware, our fearless leader, speaking tonight, and then a friend of mine, Cathcart, who actually gets to go to Two Rivers with me. I get to work with Cameron, and it's awesome. And they're going to come and speak. Why don't you guys come up? Help me welcome them up tonight as they're going to share with us about missing the mark. I'm excited for what God's doing for us.
Before we start throwing things at bows and arrows and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, Troy did a really good job of introducing the whole missing the mark minus the Cheerios thing. I don't know. I mean, you thought that was good, so you're aiming at Cheerios too? Oh my gosh, here we go. All right, so missing the mark. We're all missing the mark at some level, shape, or form. So Cam and I are going to get real tonight, and we're going to share some moments in our lives where we have missed the mark, and where it created anxiety and depression, and how we kind of swung through that. So we're really excited to get into that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out an arrow here, and out of this arrow here is Cam's first missing the mark. So let's see what we got. I am alone. I am alone.
I am alone. I'm alone. I was alone. Man, I want to talk with you guys a little bit more about why I missed the mark on that. But before I get into that, I do want to tell you guys a little bit more about my story. Is my mic not working? Oh, I'll just hold it up right here. Perfect. Can you guys hear me? Is that good? All right. Hey, I want to tell you guys a little bit about my story with depression and with anxiety. See, I still remember the moment like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my dorm room in college. I was writing a paper for a criminal justice class that I had, and then all of a sudden I started having my very first panic attack. And if you've never had a panic attack before, because I hadn't at this time, a panic attack feels like you're dying. I literally was in my dorm room feeling like I was dying. Some of you guys probably know what I mean, but I was sitting there writing my paper, and all of a sudden the walls of the room literally felt like they were caving in on me. I started to get claustrophobic. My heart started to pound at 1,000,000 miles a minute. I couldn't catch my breath. I started sweating. I became nauseous. Like legit. This sounds crazy. I know if you've never had a panic attack, you're like, this dude's nuts. But I had it like an out-of-body experience where I was like above watching myself have this panic attack. It was insane. And so I did what I thought you were supposed to do anytime you felt stressed out or anytime you felt anxious. And I told myself, get it together. Figure it out, Cameron. And I know there's some people sitting in here tonight that have probably been in the same boat, or maybe you're in that boat right now where you're struggling and you're just telling yourself, get it together, figure it out. But the problem with anxiety and depression is that sometimes your brain, it just can't figure it out. And my brain falls into that category. I couldn't figure it out. And so this first panic attack that I had, it ended up lasting all night long. And I remember just curling up in the fetal position on my bed, bawling my eyes out, screaming out to God, like, what's happening to me right now? Why is this happening to me right now? Just hoping that in the morning when the sun comes up, the panic attacks will be gone. Unfortunately, when the sun came up, I just had another panic attack. And then another one. And another one, and another one, and another one. And it got to the point to where I literally couldn't leave my house because I was so scared that I was gonna have a breakdown out in public. Like, this wasn't supposed to be me. Like, I was a college football player. I was making great grades. I had an amazing family. I had a great group of friends. I had an amazing girlfriend. I had a great life. Like, I was a normal person. I wasn't supposed to be the anxious one. I wasn't supposed to be the depressed one. And many of you guys might feel this way. Like, this isn't supposed to happen to me. I'm not supposed to be anxious. I'm not supposed to be depressed. And then my mind, it started to play tricks on me, because that's what anxiety does. It just causes more anxiety. My mind started to tell me, you're probably the only person that has ever felt this way. You're probably the only person that's ever had the thoughts that you're having. You're probably the only person who gets on WebMD for 5 minutes and diagnoses themselves with 20 different illnesses. Like, nobody understands you, Cameron. Nobody gets you, Cameron. You can't be honest with anybody, Cameron. Cameron, you are all alone. And so instead of being real, instead of being vulnerable, instead of being honest, I tried to hide it from everyone. And I didn't realize that there were so many people, that there were so many other men, that there were so many other people my age, that there were so many normal people out there that struggled with the exact same thing that I was going through. See, I thought that I had to have it all together because all my friends on Facebook, all my friends on Instagram, everybody that I talked to at church, it looked like they had it all together. So I want to tell someone tonight this. I want to free someone up tonight a little bit. And it's with this. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. And I want real quick to kind of paint a picture for everyone sitting in this room tonight, because I do believe that there is comfort in solidarity. So I want you guys to kind of just look around the room. Look around the room, wink at somebody, give somebody a head nod. Look around the room. All right. So, statistics say this. Like right now, currently in the United States, 25.8% of people have a diagnosed mental illness. Right now in the United States, 8.7% of people have major depression. Right now in the United States, 19.1% of Americans are living with severe anxiety. And that's just right now. I read the other day that 65% of people at some point in their lives will go through a season of depression or a season of anxiety. I read this from, I think it was the National Institute of Mental Health, and it said that over the course of the last year, 1 in 5 people will have had suicidal thoughts. 1 in 5 people, and it went on to say that 30% of Americans at some point in their lives have contemplated suicide. Like, those numbers, they're absolutely staggering. And if you look around the room tonight, if you look around the room right now, over half of the people sitting in here, probably more because of the event that it is, but over half the people sitting in here has struggled with some of those topics. Which makes me wonder, like, why are we so scared sometimes to be real? Why are we so scared sometimes to be vulnerable? Why are we so scared sometimes to be honest? There's so many people sitting in here tonight who have been where you have been. There are people sitting in here tonight who are broken and hurting and struggling just like you. Like, you are not alone. But let's look at what the Bible has to say. What's the Bible say about these topics? And if you look at the Bible, I find it amazing that God uses some really messed up people, some people that probably were struggling with depression, some people that probably were struggling with anxiety. Hannah, Elijah, David, Solomon, Paul, just to name a few. And I want to read you a little bit about what David has to say about his life and what he's struggling with. And as I read, I want you to kind of think about what he's saying, because I think it'll resonate with a lot of people sitting in this room tonight. But in Psalm 6, he says this: "No, Lord, don't condemn me. Don't punish me in your fiery anger. Please deal gently with me. Show me mercy, for I am sick and frail. I am fading away with weakness. Heal me, for I am falling apart. How long until you take this pain in my body and in my soul? Lord, I am trembling in fear. I'm exhausted. I'm worn out with weeping. I endure weary, sleepless nights filled with moaning, soaking my pillow with tears." In Psalm 13, it says, "I'm hurting, Lord. Will you forget me forever? How much longer, Lord, will you look the other way when I'm in need? How much longer must I cling to this constant grief? I have endured the shaking of my soul, so how much longer will my enemy have the upper hand?" And I think a lot of us sitting in this room tonight, we've probably prayed prayers like David. I think so many of us, we've probably had those nights where we've endured those weary, sleepless nights, soaking our pillows with tears. See, I remember when I read this verse, and it was in this season of anxiety, and somebody told me, go read the Psalms, because David struggled with it as well. And so one night, I was having a panic attack in the middle of the night. I woke up, and I just started reading through the Psalms, and I came upon these verses. And I literally started crying my eyes out because all of a sudden I started to realize maybe I'm not so alone. See, I think the whole point of what I'm trying to say is I just want to tell someone that's sitting in here tonight, like, you're not alone. I think there's someone sitting in here tonight that's in the middle of a trial. I think there's somebody sitting in here tonight that's struggling with fear, that's struggling with anxiety, that's in the middle of a storm. And they're keeping it to themselves because they feel like they're all alone. They feel like nobody will understand them. They feel like that nobody will get them. They feel like if they were to open up, they'd be labeled the outcast. They'd be labeled the crazy one. And I want to encourage someone tonight that there is healing and there is freedom in community. A couple years ago, I was in a lot better shape than I'm in right now. And I got asked to take part in a CrossFit competition. And so a bunch of the members at my CrossFit gym, they came to cheer me on. And the workout that I was doing, it was a longer workout. We ran a mile, we did a bunch of push-ups, a bunch of pull-ups, a bunch of squats, and then we ran another mile. And so one thing about me is that I do not pace myself, unfortunately, which can be a really bad thing in CrossFit. And so we started out, and I took off running. I ran the mile as fast as I could. Like, I was looking behind me, I was like, I'm killing everybody right now. And then I did the push-ups, I did the pull-ups, I did the squats, I started my mile, and when I started my mile, I was like, I'm winning this thing. And so I started the mile, I took off as fast as I could running the mile, not pacing myself at all. And when I was about 3/4 of the way through that last mile, all of a sudden I hit a wall. And this wasn't like a wall where it's like, oh, I gotta slow down wall. This was like, no, my body literally shut down on me. Like, I dropped to the ground and I couldn't go any further. And I was laying there and I was thinking, how am I gonna get out of this? How am I gonna get out of this? And then all of a sudden, from behind me, I heard this, let's go, Cameron. Let's go, Cameron. You got this, Cameron. And I turned around and I saw all of my friends from the CrossFit gym catching up to me, cheering me on. Like, we got your back. You can do this, Cameron. You've got this. And in that moment, I got the strength to stand up and finish the race. I didn't win, but I finished it. I finished it. But I want to encourage someone here tonight that this community right here is a community that will do exactly that. You're not alone in your fight against fear, your fight against depression, your fight against anxiety. There is a community of people here for you. There's a community of people that will come and they'll cheer you on. They'll say, let's go, let's go. You can do it. You might have fallen down, but get back up. Or if you can't get up, we'll help pick you up. You can do this. We got your back. You can finish this race. That's a community of people right here tonight. And when we truly start to realize that our lives are better in community, when we truly start to realize that we are not alone, when we truly start to realize that we can be real and vulnerable and honest about what we're going through, that's when our lives begin to change. All right, now for you. Now for you. Here we go.
All right.
Oh, thank you. All right. Let's see if I can get this out.
What do we got? What do we got?
Here we go. Making work my idol. Making work my idol.
All right, he was truthful. You ready for my truth bombs? You ready? Here we go. So, I was really a selfish person before I met Jesus. Really. It's hard for me to admit that there was so much that was more important to me, and including my family, and that's what's even more difficult to talk about. So before I gave my life over to the Lord, before I gave my life to Jesus, and I realize even as I say that, there are people in this room that are like, man, that is just a weird saying, gave your life over to the Lord. Like, it's a little vague, a little strange, not sure I'm buying it. It's okay, just walk with me through this, will you? So in today's culture, I think you all agree with me that it's very, very, very easy to make it about you, to make it about yourself, right? I gotta make sure that I take care of me this year, right? I mean, how many times have we heard that, okay? So grab yourself a self-help book or a self-help podcast or a documentary, and oh my goodness, don't forget to grab your selfie while you're talking about your self-help stuff with your glass of coffee, right? And then you caption out, I'm gonna focus on me in 2020, right? And listen, not in this healthy kind of way, like you've got to pour into your cup before you can pour into someone else's, or the famous analogy where you have to, put on your oxygen mask first if the plane's going down before you help with someone else's oxygen mask. Now listen, I get that that kind of self-care is super important, and I think that there is even some biblical things that will back that up. I'm talking about a very, very, very unhealthy type of self-focus. The me, myself, and I. And that's how I lived my life until my nervous breakdown in 2011. So my world revolved around achievements, influence, position, and power. You see, I was a successful sales manager for a very profitable healthcare company. And my life revolved around the next big paycheck, the next big sale that I would land. And ooh, was I proud of those sales that I could land. And of course, it was always in my own power and my own strength. Ooh, I loved a good argument with the doctor. I love to win those arguments with doctors and win them over and try to grab those sales. And I was just so proud of all these things that I could do. And the next big excuse I would make to my family, that I needed just a little bit more time to work. Put them on the back burner. Missing the mark. Big time. And then in 2011, I experienced a massive nervous breakdown. Now, I've talked about this openly for many years, but many of you tonight don't know my story. So let me give it to you in a nutshell. It was hell on earth. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't work, and I could not care for my children. I was completely debilitated. I was literally consumed with the most intense and dangerous forms of anxiety. Now, this is the kind of anxiety that turns into depression, and that depression turns into these ugly, dark thoughts, that whisper to you, you'd be better off dead. This journey of hell lasted about 18 months. It was a process of recovery. I was in Christian therapy, and we really recommend that here with Fearless Women, and we have resources for the best Christian therapists around. But I need you to understand something. Even though I'm through that part of my journey, I'm still very susceptible to falling right back into that again if I'm not careful. And I've openly said that just 2 weeks ago, I experienced a panic attack while I was deep sea fishing in the middle of the ocean. I sincerely hope no one in this room has ever experienced that type of anxiety and depression or that type of darkness, but as Cam just read off those stats, and I just want to nail it home one more time. My hope doesn't matter because the facts are the facts. 1 in 4 people. Y'all look around again. Count off 4 people. 1 in 4 people have experienced this type of darkness, and it may even be you. So the question is, why? Why? Why are we a society that is dripping with anxiety and depression? Well, I know why I was dripping with it. And perhaps you're a lot more like me than you might even think. Making work my idol goes much deeper than that. Because, you see, When you are the God of your own world, there is no room for God of the world to move and work in your life. I'm gonna say something that's maybe a little shocking, might offend you just a little bit. I don't like that, but it's a truth that I had to come to grips with. And it's a truth that I still struggle with. But it's a truth that when I came to grips with, it changed my life in a very, very profound way. And here it is. You, me, us. We are not here for our good, but for God's good. Hebrews 13:14 backs us up. For this world is not our permanent home. We are looking forward to a home yet to come. Billy Graham, oh, do we love Billy Graham? He's in heaven now, hallelujah. But look what he said. He said, my home is in heaven. I'm just passing through this world. Do you live like that? Do you live in a way that everything you do helps lead people to heaven, our permanent home? Do you live kingdom-minded every single day? I know I didn't. It took a massive nervous breakdown, the deepest, darkest moments of my life, to wake up and realize that living a life that was self-focused instead of him-focused was going to lead me to a path of destruction. So remember when I told you, that whole part where I gave my life to Jesus, I surrendered, all of that. Here it is. In the privacy of my own bedroom, in between panic attacks, I surrendered. I gave up control. I asked Jesus to drive. And I understand supernaturally in that moment, by the power of the Holy Spirit, that giving up control was exactly what I needed to find freedom from fear and anxiety and depression. And that is the day that my life changed for the better, for the rest of my life. And I have not looked back since. So my question to all of you, before we move on to Cam's second miss. Who is driving? You or Jesus? I believed the lies.
You see, I missed the mark because I started to believe the lies. I started to believe that I was alone. I started to believe that I would never feel normal again. I started to believe that I could never get better. I started to believe that Jesus had turned his back on me. I started to believe that I didn't have the power in my life to conquer the trials and the storms that were coming my way. See, I felt absolutely powerless. And I would guess that if anybody in here has ever went through that, you've probably started to believe the lies as well. You started to believe that you're powerless over the fear, you're powerless over the anxiety, you're powerless over the depression in your lives. And I want to tell someone tonight, I want to encourage someone tonight that maybe you are powerless, but I believe with all of my heart, and I'm willing to stake my life on it, that Jesus Christ living and working inside of you is powerful enough to defeat any of that. See, here's what the Bible has to say about that power. In Ephesians 1:19-20, it says, I pray that you will continually experience the immeasurable greatness of God's power made available to you through faith. Then your lives will be an advertisement of this immense power as it works through you. This is the mighty power that was released when God raised Christ from the dead. Or one of my favorite verses of all time, a verse that I know that Fearless uses all the time, but in 1 Timothy, where it says, "For God did not give you a spirit of fear, but the Holy Spirit, who gives you mighty power." You see, you have the power living inside of you. In my prayer tonight, and I'm believing tonight that there's going to be people here that leave feeling recharged, that there's going to be people leaving here tonight believing that you have the power inside of you to take on the world, that you have the power inside of you to take on the fear, the anxiety, the depression, the storms that come your way. But tomorrow, and in the weeks to come, when life starts to get hard, the devil's going to start speaking lies into your life again. He's going to start telling you, you're powerless. You can't do this. You can't conquer the fear in your life. And I wish that Christy and I wish that we could follow you around in the weeks to come, every single second of every single day. We won't, because that's weird, but I wish that we could follow you around, and every single time that anxious thought starts to enter your mind, every single time your heart starts to pound a little bit faster, every single time you can't catch your breath, every single time you're crying yourself to sleep, every single time you feel unloved, you feel unworthy, you feel all alone, I wish that we could scream at the top of our lungs into your ear, you have the power. You have the power of Jesus Christ living inside of you. You have the power of his kingdom living inside of you. I wish that I could do that. I wish I could follow you around and tell you that every single day. I can't. But I got good news for you. Because Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, living inside of you, he can. And I want to tell someone tonight that the power of the kingdom goes wherever the King reigns. And if the King of Kings is reigning in your life, then his kingdom will go wherever you go, which means his power will go wherever you go. So now in every situation that we go into, we can go into it with boldness and courage, knowing that the power of Jesus Christ is working in our lives. Whether it be at work, whether it be at school, whether it be with your family, any of the situations you step into where you feel fear and anxiety, we can step into that situation with courage and power, knowing that Jesus Christ is working in us and through us. And if for a moment you feel like that power's left you, if for a moment you start to believe the lies of the devil telling you you have no power over these storms. You have no power over this fear. You don't have no power over this anxiety. See, that would mean that Jesus has abandoned you. And I got good news. Because my Bible says that he will never leave us, that he will never forsake us, that he will never leave us high and dry. Therefore, wherever we go, we can go with power because Jesus Christ is in us. See, we need to hear this tonight. Because the devil, he's going to start speaking lies into our lives. And we need to look right back at the devil when we start to hear these lies. Say, no. No, I've got the power. And it's not my own power, but it's the power of Jesus Christ living inside of me. So every single time we start to believe the lies, that we're not good enough, that no one will ever love you the way that you are, that feeling of being alone, that fear that we will never get over the anxiety or the depression that we're living with, we can look straight at those lies and we can declare, I have power over you because Jesus Christ reigns in me. And that power is the same power that spoke mountains into existence. That power is the same power who tells oceans where to start and where to stop. That power is the same power who tells blind men to see and they see. That power is the same power that tells dead men to rise and they rise. That power is the same power that conquered the grave. That power is the same power that conquered sin for all of eternity. That power is the same power that one day will redeem every lie the devil has ever told. And we've got that power living inside of us.
That's right.
See, because of that power, the lies that the devil throws at us, they don't stand a chance. See, when we start to believe the power of Jesus Christ living inside of us, and we stop to believe the lies that this world and the devil tell us, our lives will begin to change. All right, people pleasing. People pleasing.
What people think of you. Am I on? Doesn't sound. Am I on? Here it comes, here it comes. 1 second. Thank you. All right, what people think of you. So, nothing creates anxiety faster in my life than maybe a deep sea fishing excursion than people pleasing, right? And it's that sneaky little feeling that kind of pops up. It's sneaky, y'all. You know it's sneaky. And it just kind of comes in and you're like, does she like me? Did I just make her mad? Oh crap, I just made her mad. She's mad at me right now. Well, I don't care what she thinks anyway. And then you just have like this crazy cycle of stuff that's going on in your mind, right? And I got a couple examples for you when people pleasing did not win in my life, and then we're gonna walk through the other part of that. But I need you to notice the struggle. Notice the struggle with me. So, back in 2015, my husband and I knew we were called to start Fearless Women. And I trusted this dream of helping women overcome fear and anxiety and depression to some very influential leaders that I looked up to in my life. And here's what happened, and this is so crazy. They used a bow and arrow analogy with me, and they said, you know, Christy, you need to aim longer before you fire. And then they kind of just backed it up with, it's not time, it's not your time yet, you're not ready, it's not time. And I remember walking away from that being so crushed. Because y'all, this isn't something that I just like came up with overnight. It is something that I had been praying over for quite some time and worked up the courage to talk to them about it. So I come home to my husband and we're having this conversation in the kitchen and I'm crying and I'm like, oh, I'm so sad, I told me I'm not supposed to do it, I need to aim longer. He said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And he just stopped and I could tell he took a moment to pray, and then he looked right at me, and I'll never forget this moment, with so much confidence, and he said, nope, if you aim too long, you'll miss. Let's go, it's time to start this thing. And I was like, wow. Shortly after that, Fearless Women began. I got one more for you. So once I was told by a woman who was very close to me at the time, someone that you would consider in your inner circle, not to go to a speaking engagement that I had been hired to speak at because she was feeling that if I went, I would get into a car accident if I went. What? Wow, okay. So once again, I took that to my husband. Now listen, I want you to notice something. Cam mentioned the community, and that's very, very important. It is so important that we surround ourselves with godly people. The people that are praying for us, that are seeking God's word, that can help pray for you and guide you in big decisions. In fact, it's biblical. It says that there is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. So again, I take it to my husband and we pray over this. And this was a big deal. It was kind of scary, you know, and we both had total peace that if I went to this speaking engagement that I wasn't going to get into a car accident and everything was going to be okay. I'm here. There was no car accident. Those are examples where Galatians 1:10 kept us grounded, kept Troy and I grounded. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. But many times, I have failed to remember Galatians 1:10. And I put a friendship, a family member, a boss a coworker. I mean, come on, let's be real. You know where I'm going here with this. Now it's your turn to fill in the blank of someone you gave the seat to God to. And you gave it to them because you wanted to make them happy. Or you didn't want to rock the boat. Or you didn't want to upset them. But I'm here to tell you, you know what happens when you do that? When you seek approval of people over God? Lack of peace. And anxiety opens. It's all in there now. So I want to quickly tell you a story in the Bible that I have pondered over and over and over and prayed about so many times. And it's the story of Peter being a punk. Peter being a punk. Peter was a disciple. He betrays Jesus. And here's the absolutely crazy part about all of this. Jesus calls it out before it even happens. Here's what I need you to know about Peter. We got to get to know Peter just a little bit before I really nail this point home, because it's a good point. But you got to understand Peter. So Peter was one of the first chosen disciples to come on out and follow Jesus along with his brother Andrew. Jesus renamed him to Peter from Simon. Peter means rock. Peter was married. Peter was a fisherman for a living. This is the part I really like about Peter, because I kind of get Peter, right? Peter was strong-willed, enthusiastic, but impulsive and brash at times. Yeah, I like Peter. Peter was the first to call Jesus the Son of the living God, the Messiah. It was Peter who left the boat and walked on water. You all remember that, right? Peter walked on water. The dude had faith. Peter was also an eyewitness to the many miracles that Jesus did. It was Peter who bragged that he would never forsake Jesus, even if everyone else did. So that's the background on Peter. But before Peter denies knowing Jesus, this is what Jesus says in Matthew 26:34. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even knew me. Peter was in Jesus' inner circle, as close as you can possibly get, and he flat out denies the fact that he even knew him to people. Not just once, y'all, but 3 times. I think it's pretty safe to say that Peter had a people-pleasing problem. It's hard to say. Why in the world did I put all those keys together? But don't judge him too hard, because I'm sure you can think of a time where you should have stood up for what was right, and you didn't, because you were afraid of people. I know I can think of times where I should have had someone's back, and I didn't. Guilty. I was Peter. And I've also had people be Peter to me. Over the past few years, learning to navigate ministry and leadership, I've had many situations where I have been deeply wounded and betrayed by people that were supposed to be in my inner circle, that should have had my back. They did it. I don't like it when people hurt me. And I know you don't like it when people hurt you either. So let's get back to the story of Peter. This is what I pondered so many times. Jesus, why were you so cool and collected and calm about the fact that your main squeeze, your best friend, your top dog, your bro would betray you? And here is what I believe God was teaching me through that question that I kept asking him over and over. I think what he was sharing, I think it was, Christy, you gave trusted people in your heart that only I deserved. Here's what I think that means. People will betray you. People will let you down. But the only person that never will is God. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't trust people, because goodness gracious, being in community and giving your heart to someone and loving and trusting and loving again and forgiving is one of the greatest gifts that we have here on this earth. But what I am saying is when you trust people above Jesus, you will be let down. And I think that's why Jesus was so calm about Peter denying him and betraying him and calls it out before it even happens. Because his trust and identity was not in that friendship. It was not in Peter. It was in God himself. He knew that when Peter would let him down, God the Father never would. We're about to do some self-reflection. Honestly, my favorite part of the night. When you came in here tonight, you got an envelope. It's the donation envelope, but inside that donation envelope, there's a white piece of paper. Will you all do me a favor and get that out for me right now? Friends, we're a bunch of broken people in need of a Savior. We all miss the mark. Will you take a moment? Write down where you feel like you're missing the mark the most. I'm going to read this to you. We're going to listen to some lyrics of this powerful song. We're going to do something. We're going to pray at the end. Lean in to this moment. Write down where you're missing the mark. In Psalms 56:11, it says, "In God I trust. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me?" What can man do to me that God can't vindicate? What can man do to me that God cannot use for good? What can man do to me that God cannot fix? What can man do to me that God cannot redeem, that God cannot use for his glory? In God I trust. I will not be afraid. I want to leave you with this thought on people pleasing. Well-meaning people will steer you in the wrong direction, but the voice of God never will.